Welcome back. Let us employ the little grey cells once more. In the hushed twilight of Wiltshire's rolling hills, Ashford Manor stood as a sentinel of secrets, its grand facade cloaking the desires and deceptions of those within. The Royal Heirloom Ruby, a gem whispered to carry a curse of misfortune, lay locked in its vault, awaiting its moment of glory. Yet, as the elegant guests gathered for its unveiling, an unseen hand moved in the shadows, weaving a web of betrayal that would ensnare them all. Hercule Poirot, with his unerring eye for the hidden truths of the human heart, sensed the storm brewing beneath the manor's polished surface, a storm that would break with the vanishing of a jewel and the unraveling of a family's darkest lies. Chapter 1. The Gathering at Ashford Manor. The late autumn sun cast a golden pallor over the rolling hills of the English countryside, its fading rays painting the ivy-clad walls of Ashford Manor in hues of amber and russet. The estate, a grand Georgian edifice nestled in the heart of Wiltshire, stood as a monument to the Harrington family's storied lineage, its towering chimneys and mullioned windows exuding an air of timeless dignity. Yet, as I, Captain Arthur Hastings, stepped from the motor car onto the gravel drive, a shiver of unease crept down my spine, though whether from the chill November breeze or some intangible premonition, I could not say. Beside me, my old friend Hercule Poirot, the diminutive Belgian detective with his impeccably waxed mustache and gleaming patent leather shoes, surveyed the scene with those piercing green eyes that seemed to see beyond the veneer of civility. "Mon ami," Poirot remarked, adjusting his scarf with a fastidious flick, "there is something in the air tonight, n'est-ce pas? A gathering such as this, in a house so grand, always conceals more than it reveals. The human heart, Hastings, it is a labyrinth, and we shall soon navigate its twists. We had been summoned to Ashford Manor by Lord Reginald Harrington, a man whose reputation as a collector of rare jewels preceded him. His latest acquisition, the Royal Heirloom Ruby, a gem of unparalleled beauty, said to have adorned the crowns of monarchs before falling into private hands, was to be unveiled this very evening to a select coterie of guests. The invitation, penned in Lord Harrington's florid hand, had promised an occasion of singular importance, and Poirot, ever intrigued by the interplay of wealth and human nature, had accepted with alacrity. I, as ever, was content to follow in his wake, eager to witness the workings of his extraordinary mind. The great oak doors of the manor swung open, revealing Mr. Jenkins, the butler, a man of advanced years whose stoic demeanor and immaculate livery bespoke decades of service. "Welcome, Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings," he intoned, his voice as measured as a metronome. "His lordship awaits you in the drawing-room." We were ushered through a marble-floored vestibule, its walls adorned with portraits of stern-faced Harrington ancestors, their eyes seeming to follow us as we passed. The drawing-room, when we reached it, was a study in opulence. Crystal chandeliers gleamed overhead, their light refracting across mahogany paneling and sumptuous velvet drapes. A fire crackled in the hearth, casting flickering shadows that danced across the faces of the assembled company. Lord Reginald Harrington stood at the center of the room, a robust figure in his late 50s, his silver hair swept back from a high forehead, his eyes alight with the fervor of a man possessed by his passion. He wore a tailored dinner jacket, the ruby-red cufflinks at his wrists, a subtle nod to the evenings. Centerpiece. "Monsieur Poirot!" he exclaimed, striding forward with a vigor that belied his years. "Your presence honors us, and Captain Hastings, a pleasure. Allow me to introduce my family and guests." First came Lady Evelyn Harrington, his wife, a woman of striking elegance whose delicate features and poised bearing suggested a life of refinement. Her gown of midnight blue silk shimmered in the firelight, and her smile, though gracious, held a trace of reserve. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, extending a gloved hand, "your reputation precedes you. I trust you'll find our little gathering diverting." Next was their son, Victor Harrington, a tall, broad-shouldered young man whose handsome features were marred by a certain restlessness in his gaze. His dinner jacket was impeccably cut, yet there was a carelessness in his posture, a hint of defiance in the way he tossed back a lock of dark hair. "Poirot, eh?" he said, his tone bordering on insolence. "Heard you're a bit of a sleuth. Hope there's no need for that tonight." Beside him stood Miss Clara Beaumont, Victor's fiancée, a woman of quiet beauty, whose auburn hair was swept into an elegant chignon. As a jewelry expert of some renown, her presence was no surprise, yet her demeanor was one of studied calm, her hazel eyes betraying a keen intelligence. "Monsieur Poirot," she said softly, "I've read of your cases. It's a privilege to meet you." Dr. Elias Thorne, the family physician, was a lean man with sharp features and a scholarly air, his wire-rimmed spectacles glinting as he inclined his head. "A detective among us," he said with a faint smile. "Let us hope your talents remain untested this evening." There was a curious intensity in his gaze, as though he were appraising Poirot as one might a rare specimen. Finally, there was Mr. Jenkins, who, having divested himself of his duties at the door, now hovered discreetly at the room's edge, his expression as inscrutable as ever. "Dinner is served, my lord," he announced, and we proceeded to the dining-room, a cavernous space dominated by a long table set with silver and crystal. The meal was a triumph of culinary artistry: consommé, roasted pheasant, and a delicate lemon soufflé. Yet the conversation was the true centerpiece. Lord Harrington, seated at the head of the table, held court with tales of the ruby's provenance. "It is a gem of legend," he declared, his voice resonant with pride. "Once set in the crown of King Charles II, it was lost during the Civil War, only to resurface in the hands of a French nobleman. Its journey to my collection was no small feat, I assure you." "A cursed gem, some say," Victor interjected, his tone laced with mockery. "Bad luck to those who try to possess it unlawfully." "Isn't that right, Father?" Lady Evelyn's hand tightened on her wine-glass. "Victor, please. Such talk is unbecoming." Clara Beaumont leaned forward, her voice measured. "The ruby's history is indeed fascinating, Lord Harrington. Its clarity and depth are unparalleled. But curses, surely that's superstition." Dr. Thorne chuckled softly. "Superstition or not, Miss Beaumont, men have killed for less than a ruby. Its value lies not just in carats, but in the desires it ignites." Poirot, who had been listening with his customary air of polite detachment, set down his fork. "Monsieur le Docteur, you speak of desire. Yet desire, it can blind, non? Tell me, Lord Harrington, this ruby, it is well protected?" Harrington's eyes gleamed. "Impenetrable, Monsieur Poirot. The vault in my study is a marvel of modern engineering. steel-lined, combination-locked, and accessible only by a key I keep on my person. He patted his waistcoat, where a faint bulge suggested the key's presence. No thief could breach it. Yet the human element, Poirot said softly. It is always the weak link, is it not? A silence fell, broken only by the clink of crystal as Jenkins refilled our glasses. The fire's glow seemed to dim, as though the room itself sensed the weight of Poirot's words. I glanced at the faces around the table. Lady Evelyn's composed mask, Victor's sardonic grin, Clara's thoughtful frown, Thorne's guarded expression, Jenkins' impassive stare. Each seemed to hold a secret, a shadow beneath the surface. After dinner, we adjourned to the drawing-room for coffee and liqueurs. The conversation turned lighter. Victor regaled us with tales of his recent travels to Monte Carlo, though I noted a strain in Clara's smile as he spoke of the gaming tables. Lady Evelyn excused herself briefly, citing a need to check on the household staff, while Dr. Thorne engaged Poirot in a discussion of Belgian art, a subject that seemed to bore Victor excessively. Jenkins moved silently among us, offering cigars and brandy with the precision of a clockwork automaton. It was then that Lord Harrington proposed the evening's main event. "My friends," he said, rising with a flourish, "the hour has come. Join me in the study, where the Royal Heirloom Ruby awaits its moment of glory." We followed him through a series of corridors, their walls hung with tapestries depicting scenes of medieval hunts. The study, when we reached it, was a smaller room, but no less grand, its oak-paneled walls lined with bookshelves and a single portrait of a stern-faced Harrington forebear. At the far end stood the vault, a formidable steel door set into the wall, its surface gleaming under the light of a chandelier. Harrington approached with the air of a showman, producing the key from his waistcoat with a theatrical gesture. "Behold," he said, inserting it into the lock. The mechanism clicked, and the door swung open, revealing a velvet-lined interior. But as Harrington reached inside, his face contorted in a mask of disbelief. "No, it cannot be," he cried, his voice rising to a pitch of anguish. "The ruby! It's gone!" A collective gasp filled the room. Lady Evelyn clutched her husband's arm, her face pale. "Reginald, how can this be?" Victor swore under his breath, his eyes darting to the window. Clara stepped forward, her expression one of professional concern, while Dr. Thorne adjusted his spectacles, peering into the empty vault. Jenkins, standing by the door, betrayed no emotion, though his hands tightened briefly at his sides. Poirot alone remained calm, his eyes narrowing as he surveyed the scene. "Calm yourselves, mes amis," he said, his voice a steady anchor in the storm. "Hastings, note the details, if you please. The vault, it shows no signs of tampering, oui? And Lord Harrington, you are certain the ruby was here this morning?" "Certain," Harrington bellowed, his face flushed. "I checked it myself at dawn. The key never leaves me." "Then," Poirot said, his tone deceptively mild, "we have a mystery, a locked vault, a missing gem, and a room full of secrets. Let us begin." As the guests erupted into a clamor of questions and accusations, I scribbled notes in my pocketbook, my mind racing. The ruby, it seemed, had vanished into thin air, and yet Poirot's serene confidence suggested he already saw threads invisible to the rest of us. The night, so promising in its elegance, had taken a dark turn, and I knew that Ashford Manor would yield its truths only under the relentless scrutiny of Hercule Poirot's grey cells. The hours that followed were a whirlwind of activity. Lord Harrington, still reeling, insisted on searching the study, though Poirot gently dissuaded him, citing the need to preserve evidence. "The scene, it must remain untouched," he said, his finger raised like a conductor's baton. "Every detail it speaks, if we but listen." Lady Evelyn retired to her rooms, claiming distress, though I noted the firmness of her step as she left. Victor paced like a caged animal, muttering about damned thieves and casting suspicious glances at Jenkins, who remained impassive. Clara offered her expertise, examining the vault's interior with a jeweler's loupe, her brow furrowed. "No scratches, no forced entry," she murmured. "It's as if the ruby simply evaporated." Dr. Thorne hovered near the bookshelves, his fingers tracing the spines as though seeking solace in their familiarity. "A perplexing affair," he said to no one in particular. "Perhaps an outsider, a burglar with uncommon skill?" Poirot shook his head. "Non, Monsieur le Docteur. The windows, they are locked from within. The key, it remains with Lord Harrington. This is no work of an outsider. The answer, it lies among us." His words hung in the air, heavy with implication. I looked again at the faces around me, each a study in its own right. The lord's outrage, the lady's restraint, the son's agitation, the fiancée's focus, the doctor's detachment, the butler's silence. Somewhere among them, I felt certain, lay the key to the ruby's disappearance. But which key, and whose hand had turned it? As the clock struck midnight, Poirot announced his intention to retire and reflect. "Sleep, mes amis, if you can," he said, his eyes twinkling with that familiar spark. "Tomorrow, the little grey cells, they shall begin their work in earnest. Hastings, come, we have much to ponder." We were shown to our rooms, a pair of adjoining chambers overlooking the manor's gardens. As I settled into the four-poster bed, the events of the evening replayed in my mind. The ruby's absence, the locked vault, the web of alibis and motives. Poirot, in the next room, was no doubt already piecing together the puzzle, his mind a machine of relentless precision. For my part, I could only wonder what secrets the morrow would reveal, and whether the curse of the Royal Heirloom Ruby was more than mere legend. Chapter 2. The Unveiling and the Theft. The morning after the ruby's disappearance dawned grey and sombre, the Wiltshire sky draped in a shroud of mist that clung to the grounds of Ashford Manor like a conspirator's cloak. I awoke to the distant chime of a clock, my mind still tangled in the events of the previous night. The image of Lord Harrington's stricken face as he stared into the empty vault haunted me, as did the quiet certainty in Hercule Poirot's voice when he declared the thief to be among us. Breakfast was a subdued affair, served in the dining-room where the previous evening's opulence now felt like a mockery. The clink of silver against porcelain was the only sound, for the guests seemed loath to speak, each lost in their own thoughts, or perhaps their own secrets. Poirot, impeccable as ever in a charcoal suit, sipped his coffee with an air of serene detachment. "Mon ami," he said to me under his breath, "observe the faces. Guilt, it wears many masks, fear, defiance, even silence. We shall learn much this morning." His eyes, sharp as a hawk's, darted from one guest to another, cataloguing every gesture, every glance. Lord Harrington sat at the head of the table, his earlier vigor replaced by a haggard pallor. His fingers drummed restlessly on the tablecloth, and his gaze flickered toward the study door as though expecting the ruby to materialize. Lady Evelyn, seated beside him, maintained her composure, though her hands trembled slightly as she buttered a slice of toast. Victor slouched in his chair, his tie loosened and his expression sullen, while Clara Beaumont, opposite him, seemed absorbed in her tea, her eyes downcast but alert. Dr. Elias Thorne, ever the observer, adjusted his spectacles and murmured something about the weather, a feeble attempt to break the tension. Mr. Jenkins, the butler, moved silently about the room, his face a mask of professional neutrality. After breakfast, Poirot proposed a return to the study to examine the scene of the crime in daylight. "The light, it reveals what shadows conceal," he remarked, leading the way. The study was much as we had left it, the vault door still ajar, its empty interior a mute accusation. Lord Harrington lingered by the window, his hands clasped behind his back, while the others gathered uneasily near the bookshelves. Poirot knelt before the vault, his magnifying glass glinting as he inspected the lock. "No scratches, no signs of force," he murmured. "The mechanism, it is pristine. And you, Lord Harrington, you are certain the key never left your possession?" "Certain," Harrington replied, his voice hoarse. He produced the key from his waistcoat, a small ornate object of brass and steel, and held it aloft. "I checked the ruby at dawn yesterday, as I always do. It was there, I swear it." Poirot nodded, his lips pursed. "And no one else has access to this key?" "No one," Harrington insisted. "The vault's combination is known only to me, and the key remains on my person at all times." "Very well," Poirot said, rising. "Then let us establish the movements of all present last night. Hastings, your notebook, if you please." I dutifully opened my pocketbook, pencil poised, as Poirot began his inquiries. "Lord Harrington, you were in the drawing-room after dinner, oui? Until when?" "Until we came here for the unveiling," Harrington said. "I spoke with Dr. Thorne about his practice, then joined you all for the ruby's display." "And you, Lady Evelyn?" Poirot turned to her, his tone gentle but probing. "I remained in the drawing-room," she replied, her voice steady despite the faint flush in her cheeks. "I was arranging the flowers for the table when Jenkins informed me it was time for the unveiling." Poirot's gaze shifted to Victor, who leaned against a bookshelf, his arms crossed. "Monsieur Victor, you were not with the others." "Where were you?" Victor's jaw tightened. "I stepped out for a smoke in the garden. Needed some air. I was back before the unveiling. Clara can vouch for me." Clara hesitated, her fingers tightening around her teacup, which she had brought from the dining-room. I was in my room briefly, Victor. I had a headache and went to lie down. I didn't see you return." Victor's eyes narrowed, a flash of irritation crossing his face. "Well, I was there." "Ask anyone." Poirot turned to Dr. Thorne, who stood near the portrait of the stern-faced Harrington ancestor. "And you, Doctor? Your whereabouts?" "I was in the library," Thorne said smoothly. "I was perusing a volume on mineralogy. Fascinating subject, given the occasion. I joined the group just as we moved to the study." Finally, Poirot addressed Jenkins, who stood by the door, his posture rigid. "Monsieur Jenkins, you were fetching wine, I believe?" "Yes, sir," Jenkins replied, his voice devoid of inflection. "I was in the cellar selecting a bottle of claret for his lordship." I returned in time to open the study door for the party. Poirot stroked his mustache, his eyes gleaming with that peculiar intensity that signaled his mind was at work. "A curious tableau," he said softly. "Each of you occupied elsewhere, yet the ruby vanishes from a locked vault. A puzzle, no? Hastings, what do you make of it?" I cleared my throat, aware of the eyes upon me. "Well, Poirot, it's dashed odd. If the vault wasn't forced and the key was with Lord Harrington, it's almost as if the thief had a duplicate key, or knew the combination." "Précisément," Poirot said, his voice low. "But a duplicate key requires access, and the combination requires knowledge. We must consider all possibilities, even the impossible." At that moment, Clara stepped forward, her jeweler's loupe in hand. "Monsieur Poirot, may I examine the vault again? As an expert, I might notice something." Miss Poirot inclined his head. "By all means, mademoiselle." She knelt before the vault, her movements precise as she scanned the interior. After a moment, she shook her head. "Nothing. No marks, no residue. It's as if the ruby was never there." "Yet it was," Harrington said sharply. "I saw it myself." Poirot's eyes flicked to the window, its heavy latch firmly in place. "The windows, they are secure, oui? No sign of entry from outside?" Jenkins nodded. "I checked them myself this morning, sir. All locked, as they were last night." "Then," Poirot said, his voice taking on a theatrical cadence, "we are faced with a locked room mystery. A gem vanishes, yet no one enters, no one leaves. The solution, it lies not in the vault, but in the hearts and minds of those present." A tense silence followed, broken only by Victor's scoff. "Hearts and minds? You're saying one of us took it? That's absurd." "Is it?" Poirot's gaze was unrelenting. "Let us consider motives. A ruby of such value, millions perhaps, tempts many. Greed, desperation, even revenge. Who among you might succumb?" Lady Evelyn gasped softly, her hand rising to her throat. "Monsieur Poirot, surely you don't suspect us? We are a family." "Families, madame, are often the crucible of betrayal," Poirot said gently. "But fear not. The truth, it will emerge." Dr. Thorne adjusted his spectacles, his voice calm but edged. "A bold claim, Poirot. But without evidence, it's mere conjecture." "Evidence, doctor, is all around us," Poirot replied. "It is in the glance, the hesitation, the too perfect alibi. We shall find it." As the group dispersed, some to their rooms, others to the gardens to escape the oppressive atmosphere, Poirot drew me aside. "Hastings, what did you observe during the alibis?" I frowned, consulting my notes. "Well, Victor's story doesn't quite hold. Clara didn't confirm his return, and Jenkins was alone in the cellar, which seems convenient. Thorne's interest in mineralogy raises an eyebrow, given his knowledge of gems. And Lady Evelyn, she seemed nervous, don't you think?" Poirot nodded, his eyes gleaming. "Oui, mon ami. And yet there is more. The vault, it tells a story, but not the one we expect. Come, let us walk the grounds. The air, it clears the mind." We stepped into the garden, where the mist had lifted, revealing manicured hedges and a fountain gurgling softly. Poirot paused by a flower-bed near the study window, his gaze fixed on the ground. "Regardez, Hastings," he said, pointing to a faint impression in the earth. "A footprint, oui? Fresh and deep. Yet the window above, it is locked." "A red herring, perhaps?" I ventured. "Someone trying to make it look like an outsider?" "Perhaps," Poirot said, his tone enigmatic. "Or perhaps a clue to something deeper. We shall see." As we returned to the manor, the weight of the mystery pressed upon me. The ruby, the vault, the alibis, each piece seemed to fit nowhere, yet Poirot's confidence was unshaken. "The truth, Hastings," he said as we reached the steps, "it hides in plain sight. We need only the courage to see it." Chapter 3. Initial Interrogations. The morning mist had burned away by the time Hercule Poirot convened the household in the sunlit parlour of Ashford Manor, its tall windows casting long rectangles of light across the polished floor. The room, with its chintz armchairs and delicate porcelain ornaments, seemed an incongruous stage for the drama unfolding, yet the air was thick with unease. The theft of the Royal Heirloom Ruby had cast a pall over the guests, each of whom now eyed the others with a mixture of suspicion and defensiveness. I, Captain Arthur Hastings, stood by Poirot's side, my notebook open, ready to capture every nuance of the interrogations that were about to begin. Poirot, his small frame radiating authority, stood before the fireplace, his hands clasped behind his back. "Mes amis," he began, his voice clear and deliberate, "the ruby has vanished, yet the vault betrays no sign of violence. The key, it remains with Lord Harrington. Thus we must look to the human element. Each of you, if you please, will account for your actions last night. The truth, it is like a delicate thread, pulled gently, and it unravels." Lord Harrington, seated in a high-backed chair, glowered at the suggestion of complicity. "This is preposterous, Poirot," he said, his voice rough with indignation. "To think one of us, my family, my guests, could stoop to theft." Poirot raised a hand, his expression serene. "Patience, Lord Harrington. Suspicion, it falls on all until the truth clears the innocent. Let us begin with Lady Evelyn, seated on a settee, straightened, her hand smoothing the folds of her dove-grey dress. The pearls at her throat gleamed softly, but her fingers betrayed a nervous fidgeting as she met Poirot's gaze. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice measured but tinged with strain. "I was in the drawing-room after dinner, arranging the flowers as I said. I heard nothing unusual, saw nothing amiss. My husband's obsession with that ruby, it has brought nothing but trouble to this house." Poirot tilted his head, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Trouble, madame? Of what nature?" She hesitated, her lips parting as if to speak, then closed again. "Only that it consumes him," she said finally. "He speaks of little else. It has strained us all." "Merci, madame," Poirot said, his tone polite but probing. "And you remained in the drawing-room until the unveiling?" "Yes," she replied, though her eyes flickered briefly toward her son, Victor, who lounged against the wall, his arms crossed. Poirot turned to Victor, whose careless demeanor belied the tension in his jaw. "Monsieur Victor, you claim you were in the garden, smoking. Alone, oui?" Victor nodded, his dark eyes defiant. "That's right. I needed a break from all the pomp. I was out by the rose arbor, then came back just before we went to the study. Clara saw me return, didn't she? All eyes turned to Clara Beaumont, who sat primly on a cushioned chair, her hands folded in her lap. She flushed slightly, her hazel eyes meeting Victor's with a hint of uncertainty. I was in my room, as I mentioned," she said, her voice soft but clear. "I had a headache and retired early. I didn't see Victor return, but I heard footsteps in the hall before the unveiling." Victor's expression darkened, a flash of irritation crossing his face. "You heard me, then?" "That's proof enough, isn't it?" Poirot's mustache twitched. "Proof, monsieur, is a precise thing. Footsteps, they belong to anyone. We shall return to this. Now, Dr. Thorne?" Dr. Elias Thorne, standing near a window, adjusted his spectacles with a deliberate air. His lean frame and scholarly demeanor suggested a man more at home with books than intrigue, yet there was a sharpness in his gaze that unsettled me. "I was in the library, as I said," he replied smoothly. "I found a volume on mineralogy and lost track of time. I joined the group just as we moved to the study for the unveiling." "Mineralogy?" Poirot repeated, his tone thoughtful. "A subject most apropos, given the ruby's nature. You have an interest in gems, Doctor?" Thorne smiled faintly. "A passing one. Their chemical composition fascinates me, as does their cultural significance. But I assure you, my interest is academic, naturellement," Poirot said, though his eyes lingered on Thorne a moment longer. He turned to Mr. Jenkins, who stood by the door, his posture as rigid as a sentinel's. "And you, Monsieur Jenkins?" "The cellar, oui?" "Yes, sir," Jenkins replied, his voice flat but respectful. "I was selecting a bottle of claret for his lordship's guests." I returned to the drawing-room just as the party moved to the study. Poirot nodded, his fingers drumming lightly against his chin. "A busy household, yet a ruby vanishes. Curious, no?" He paced slowly before the fireplace, his gaze sweeping the room. "Let us consider the timeline. Dinner ended at 8:30. The unveiling was at 10. In that hour and a half, each of you claimed solitude, yet someone entered the study, opened the vault, and took the ruby. Or did they?" I looked up from my notes, puzzled. "What do you mean, Poirot?" "The ruby's gone, isn't it?" He smiled enigmatically. "The absence of a thing, Hastings, does not always mean it was taken. But we shall see. For now, let us explore the grounds. A clue, it may await us." As the group dispersed, some with murmurs of protest, others with uneasy glances, Poirot led me to the garden door. The air outside was crisp, the lawn dappled with the shadows of ancient oaks. We made our way to the flower-bed beneath the study window, where the footprint Poirot had noted earlier lay stark against the damp earth. He knelt, his magnifying glass poised, and examined it closely. "Regardez, Hastings," he said, pointing to the impression. "A man's shoe, size 9, perhaps 10, fresh from last night's dew, yet the window above it is locked and the latch is undisturbed." I frowned, peering at the print. Could it be a groundskeeper? Or someone trying to make it look like an outside job? Poirot's eyes gleamed. "A possibility, mon ami. But observe, this print, it is deep at the heel, light at the toe. Whoever stood here did not linger. A deliberate act, perhaps, to mislead." He straightened, brushing dirt from his trousers. "And yet, another clue calls." He gestured to a nearby rose bush where a cigarette butt lay discarded in the soil. I recognized the brand at once. Turkish, the same kind Victor smoked. "Victor's," I said, excitement rising. "He was here, then?" Poirot picked up the butt with a handkerchief, inspecting it closely. "Oui, but note, it is dry, while the footprint is fresh. If Victor smoked here last night, the dew would have dampened it. This it was placed, Hastings, a red herring perhaps, to cast suspicion. Before I could respond, Doctor." Thorne emerged from the manor, his coat buttoned against the chill. "Monsieur Poirot," he called, his tone genial but guarded. "I trust you're not accusing the Flora of theft. Might I suggest a tonic for the nerves? This affair has us all on edge." Poirot's smile was polite but cool. "Merci, docteur, but my nerves, they are as steel. Tell me, your interest in mineralogy, does it extend to the valuation of gems?" Thorne's eyes narrowed slightly. "Only theoretically. I've no practical experience in such matters. Yet you wrote a paper on gem forgeries, did you not?" Poirot pressed, his voice soft but insistent. Thorne stiffened. "A minor work, years ago. You've done your research, Poirot." "One must, when truth is at stake," Poirot replied. As Thorne retreated, I caught a flicker of unease in his expression, quickly masked. Back in the parlor, Poirot gathered the group once more. "Mes amis, a footprint and a cigarette suggest an outsider, yet the locked window denies it. Someone wishes us to look outward, but I, Poirot, look inward. Who benefits from the ruby's loss?" Victor snorted. "Benefits? Father's the one who loses, his pride and joy, gone." Lady Evelyn's voice trembled. "Victor, please." "This is no time for jests," Clara spoke up, her tone measured. "Monsieur Poirot, could the ruby have been taken before last night?" "A substitution, perhaps?" Poirot's eyes lit up. "An astute observation, mademoiselle. But Lord Harrington saw the ruby at dawn. Still, the idea of substitution, it merits consideration." As the group dispersed again, Poirot drew me aside. "Hastings, the alibis, they are like a house of cards. One push, and they fall. Victor's cigarette, Thorne's knowledge, Clara's hesitation, Lady Evelyn's nerves, Jenkins' solitude. Each hides something. We must dig deeper." I nodded, my mind racing. The footprint, the cigarette, the alibis, all seemed to point in different directions, yet Poirot's certainty anchored me. The ruby's theft was no simple crime, and as the morning wore on, I felt the web of suspicion tightening around Ashford Manor, each thread leading us closer to a truth that remained maddeningly out of reach. Chapter 4. Clues in the Garden. The late morning sun struggled to pierce the heavy clouds that hung over Ashford Manor, casting a muted light across the gardens where Hercule Poirot and I continued our investigation. The air was sharp with the scent of damp earth and fading roses, and the gravel paths crunched beneath our feet as we moved purposefully toward the flower bed beneath the study window. The mystery of the Royal Heirloom Ruby's disappearance weighed heavily upon me, Captain Arthur Hastings, and I could sense that Poirot's mind was already weaving together the threads of evidence we had uncovered, the footprint, the cigarette butt, the faltering alibis. Yet, as always, his serene demeanor betrayed nothing of the storm of deduction raging within his grey cells. "Mon ami," Poirot said, pausing to adjust his hat against a sudden gust, "the garden, it is a silent witness. It speaks not with words, but with traces left by those who pass. Let us listen carefully." His eyes, bright and unyielding, scanned the ground as we approached the spot where we had found the footprint earlier. I crouched beside the impression, my notebook open. "It's still here, Poirot," I said, tracing the outline with my finger. "A man's shoe, as you said, size 9 or 10, pressed deep into the soil. But with the window locked from inside, it's hard to see how it helps us." Poirot knelt beside me, his magnifying glass catching the faint light as he examined the print anew. "Patience, Hastings. A clue, it is like a single note in a symphony. It means little alone, but in harmony it sings. Observe the edges, sharp, undisturbed. This was made last night, after the dew fell, but before the morning mist lifted. Yet the cigarette butt, it tells a different story. He gestured to the Turkish cigarette we had found near the rosebush, still wrapped in his handkerchief. This, it is dry, untouched by the dew. If Monsieur Victor smoked here during his alleged absence, the cigarette would be damp, no? Someone placed it here, perhaps to point the finger at him. I frowned, puzzled. But who would want to frame Victor? And why? He's got motive enough with those gambling debts we've heard whispers about. Poirot's mustache twitched, a sure sign his mind was turning over a new idea. Motive, oui, but motives are not singular in this house. The debts of Victor, they are a beacon drawing our eyes. Yet we must look beyond the obvious. Come, let us walk the perimeter. There may be more the garden wishes to share. We followed the path around the manor, our footsteps muffled by the soft earth. The gardens were a labyrinth of neatly trimmed hedges, stone benches, and flower beds bursting with late-blooming chrysanthemums. As we rounded a corner near the conservatory, I spotted a glint of metal half buried in the soil. A small tarnished button, its surface etched with a faint crest. "Poirot, look at this!" I exclaimed, retrieving it carefully. He took the button, turning it over in his gloved fingers. A crest, perhaps of the Harrington family. Curious, not? It is worn as if torn from a garment in haste, yet it lies far from the study window. Another clue or another distraction? I jotted down the find in my notebook, my mind racing. Could it belong to one of the staff? Or perhaps someone in the family? Poirot's eyes narrowed. We shall inquire. But first, let us consider the grounds further. The thief, if they did not enter through the window, may have left another trace. We continued our circuit, pausing near a low stone wall that bordered the estate's rear. There, half hidden by a cluster of ivy, was a scrap of fabric caught on a jagged stone. It was dark blue, almost black, and slightly frayed at the edges. Poirot plucked it free, holding it to the light. "Silk, Hastings. Fine quality, perhaps from a lady's dress or a gentleman's coat. This, too, we shall keep." As we made our way back toward the manor, the crunch of gravel announced the approach of Dr. Elias Thorne. His lean figure emerged from the mist, his spectacles glinting as he offered a tight smile. "Gentlemen, still playing the sleuth? I hope the garden proves more forthcoming than the household." Poirot regarded him with that disarming politeness that often masked his sharpest scrutiny. "The garden, Doctor, it speaks in whispers. Tell me, you are a man of science. Do you walk these paths often?" Thorne shrugged, his hands in his pockets. "Occasionally, when I need to clear my head. The air here is bracing, don't you find?" "Indeed," Poirot said, his tone light but probing. "And last night, during the hour before the unveiling, you were in the library, oui? Yet the library windows, they face this very garden. Did you see Monsieur Victor, perhaps, during his promenade?" Thorne's smile faltered just for a moment. "I was engrossed in my reading, Poirot. I didn't look out. Victor's comings and goings are his own affair." "Naturellement," Poirot said, but his eyes lingered on Thorne's face. "And this button, Doctor, does it seem familiar?" He held up the tarnished crest, watching Thorne closely. Thorne peered at it, his expression unreadable. "A common design, I'd wager. Many old families have similar crests. It could belong to anyone here, or no one." Poirot nodded, pocketing the button. "Merci, Doctor. Your insight is most helpful." As Thorne retreated toward the manor, I leaned in. "He's cagey, Poirot. That paper on gem forgeries you mentioned, do you think he could have the knowledge to pull off a theft like this?" Poirot's lips curved slightly. "Knowledge, Hastings, is a tool, not a motive. But the good doctor, he knows more than he says. His interest in gems, it is not so casual as he claims. Yet we must not leap to conclusions. The garden, it has given us clues. The footprint, the cigarette, the button, the fabric. Each is a thread, but the tapestry remains incomplete. We returned to the manor, where the atmosphere was no less tense than before. In the parlor, Lady Evelyn sat with Clara, their heads bent in quiet conversation. Victor was absent, likely sulking elsewhere, while Lord Harrington paced the hall, his voice raised as he berated Jenkins for some minor oversight. The butler bore it with his usual stoicism, though I noted a faint tightening of his jaw. Poirot approached Lady Evelyn, his manner courteous but firm. "Madame, a question. This button with the Harrington crest, might it belong to a garment in this house?" She took the button, her brow furrowing. "It's possible. Our family has many old uniforms, coats, even livery for the staff. But this is worn, perhaps from a groundskeeper's jacket." Jenkins would know. Poirot turned to the butler, who had just entered with a tray of tea. "Monsieur Jenkins, this button, does it belong to the household?" Jenkins examined it briefly, his expression impassive. "It resembles the crests on our older livery, sir, but none in current use." "I can check the stores if you wish." "Do so, if you please," Poirot said. "And this fabric, silk, dark blue, does it stir any memory?" Jenkins shook his head. "I'm afraid not, sir. Many guests wear fine clothes. It could be from anyone." Clara, who had been listening, spoke up. "Monsieur Poirot, that fabric, might I see it? As a jeweler, I've an eye for detail, and I know the wardrobes here." Poirot handed her the scrap, watching her closely. She turned it over, her fingers tracing the weave. "It's high quality," she said, her voice thoughtful. "Possibly from a dress or a coat, but I can't place it. Perhaps Lady Evelyn's navy gown from last night?" Lady Evelyn's eyes widened. "My gown? No, it's intact. I wore it only for dinner and changed before the unveiling. You can check it yourself." "Merci, madame," Poirot said. "We shall verify all such details. For now the garden has spoken, but its message is cryptic. Hastings, note the clues. A footprint, staged, a cigarette, planted, a button, lost, a fabric, torn. Each points somewhere, but where? As we left the parlor, I couldn't shake the feeling that the clues were piling up, yet the truth remained elusive. "Poirot," I said, "this is getting murkier. The footprint and cigarette point to Victor, but you think they're planted. The button and fabric could belong to anyone or no one. Are we chasing shadows?" Poirot's eyes twinkled. "Shadows, Hastings, cast by light. We seek the source. The clues, they are like breadcrumbs. Some lead to the truth, others to deception. But I, Poirot, shall follow them all. As we prepared to rejoin the household, whispers of Victor's gambling debts reached us again, carried by a maid who quickly fell silent under Jenkins's stern glance. The tension in Ashford Manor was palpable, each guest a potential suspect, each clue a possible misdirection. The ruby's absence loomed like a spectre, and I knew that only Poirot's relentless logic could banish it. Chapter 5. The Servant's Tale. The afternoon light filtered through the tall windows of Ashford Manor's kitchen, casting a soft glow over the scrubbed oak table where Hercule Poirot and I sat with Mr. Jenkins, the butler. The air was heavy with the scent of fresh bread and herbs, a stark contrast to the tension that permeated the rest of the house. The theft of the Royal Heirloom Ruby had set everyone on edge, and Poirot, with his unerring instinct for uncovering hidden truths, had chosen to question Jenkins away from the prying eyes of the family. I, Captain Arthur Hastings, clutched my notebook, ready to record every detail of this interrogation, sensing that the stoic butler might hold a key to the mystery. Poirot leaned forward, his hands folded neatly on the table, his eyes fixed on Jenkins with that piercing intensity that seemed to see through flesh and bone. "Monsieur Jenkins," he began, his voice smooth but insistent, "you are the backbone of this household, are you not? 30 years of service, a life devoted to the Harringtons. Such loyalty, it is rare. Yet loyalty can blind, or it can illuminate. Tell me, what did you see last night, in the hours before the ruby vanished?" Jenkins, standing stiffly at the table's edge, his livery immaculate despite the morning's turmoil, met Poirot's gaze with a calm that bordered on defiance. "I've told you, sir," he said, his voice as measured as ever. "I was in the cellar, fetching a bottle of claret for his lordship's guests. I returned to the drawing-room just as the party moved to the study for the unveiling." Poirot's moustache twitched, a subtle sign of his mind at work. "Oui, the cellar. A solitary place, no? No one to confirm your presence there. And the keys, Monsieur Jenkins. You handle them often, I presume. The keys to the house, perhaps even to the study?" Jenkins' expression remained impassive, though I noted a slight tightening of his hands at his sides. "I manage the household keys, sir, as is my duty. The study key, however, is kept by his lordship. I've no access to the vault key, nor the combination." Poirot nodded, his eyes never leaving Jenkins's face. "Yet you are a man of observation, trained to notice the smallest detail. Tell me, did anything strike you as unusual last night? A guest out of place? A sound that did not belong?" Jenkins hesitated, his gaze flickering briefly toward the door, as though ensuring we were alone. "Nothing specific, sir. The evening was busy, dinner, the preparations for the unveiling. I was focused on my duties." Poirot leaned back, his fingers drumming lightly on the table. "Duties, oui. But let us speak of the cellar. There is a key to it, is there not? And this morning, I am told, it was missing from its hook. Curious, non?" Jenkins' composure faltered for the briefest moment, a shadow crossing his face. "The cellar key?" "Yes, sir. I noticed it was gone this morning. I assumed one of the staff had misplaced it. It happens on occasion." "On occasion," Poirot repeated, his tone soft but laden with meaning. "Yet on the night a priceless ruby vanishes, a key also disappears. A coincidence, perhaps, or a clue?" He paused, letting the question hang in the air. "Monsieur Jenkins, you have served this family for decades. You know their habits, their secrets. If someone wished to access the study, could they have done so without your knowledge?" Jenkins straightened, his voice firm. "I've served faithfully, sir. I see to the locks each night. No one entered the study without his lordship's key, not while I was about." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Faithfully, oui, but loyalty, it can be exploited. Tell me, have you ever seen anyone, family, guest, or staff, show undue interest in the vault. Jenkins' lips pressed into a thin line. His lordship's collection is well known. Guests often ask about it. Miss Beaumont, for instance, she's examined the ruby before for her studies, and Dr. Thorne, he's spoken of its properties. But interest is not theft, sir. No, it is not, Poirot agreed, his voice deceptively mild. But it is a spark that may ignite a flame. Merci, Monsieur Jenkins. You have been most helpful. As Jenkins bowed and retreated to his duties, I leaned toward Poirot, my voice low. He's hiding something, isn't he? That business with the cellar key, it's too convenient. Poirot's lips curved into a faint smile. Hiding, perhaps, but not what you think, Hastings. The butler, he is loyal, but loyalty can make one blind to the faults of those he serves. The missing key, it is a red herring, I suspect, meant to distract. But from what? Or whom? Before I could press further, Lady Evelyn entered the kitchen, her face pale and her eyes red-rimmed. Monsieur Poirot, she said, her voice trembling, this accusation against my son, it's unbearable. Victor could not have taken the ruby. He's reckless, yes, but not a thief. Poirot rose, offering her a chair with a courteous gesture. Madame, I accuse no one, yet. But the facts, they point where they will. Your son, he was absent during the critical hour. His cigarette, found near the study window. His debts, they are whispered of by the staff. These are threads, madame, and I must follow them. Lady Evelyn's hands twisted in her lap. Victor's debts are his father's fault. Reginald's obsession with that wretched ruby has drained our finances, but my son would never betray us. Poirot's gaze softened, but his voice remained firm. And you, madame? You were alone in the drawing-room. Did you truly hear nothing, see nothing? She hesitated, her eyes darting to the window. I thought I heard footsteps in the hall, but I assumed it was Jenkins or one of the maids. I was preoccupied. Poirot echoed, his tone thoughtful. With the flowers, or with something more personal? Lady Evelyn flushed, rising abruptly. I've nothing more to say, Monsieur Poirot. Excuse me? She swept from the room, leaving a faint scent of lavender in her wake. I scribbled her response in my notebook, my mind racing. She's nervous, Poirot. And Jenkins, his story about the cellar key doesn't add up. Could he have made a duplicate of the vault key? Poirot shook his head, pacing the small space between the table and the hearth. A duplicate key, it is possible, but unlikely. The vault's lock is complex, and Jenkins, he is no locksmith. No, the key to this mystery lies elsewhere. The cellar key, the footprint, the cigarette, these are diversions, Hastings, meant to obscure the truth. But the truth, it cannot hide forever. We left the kitchen, stepping into the hall where the murmur of voices reached us from the parlor. Victor's voice, sharp with anger, carried through the door. This is nonsense, Clara. You know I was in the garden. Why didn't you back me up? Clara's response was too soft to hear, but the tension in her tone was unmistakable. Poirot paused, his head tilted. Listen, Hastings. The young lovers, they quarrel. Love, it is a motive as powerful as greed. We must speak with Mademoiselle Beaumont next. As we approached the parlor, the door opened, and Clara emerged, her face pale but composed. She started at the sight of us, then recovered. Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings, have you found anything new? Poirot's smile was disarming. Perhaps, mademoiselle. A word, if you please. Your expertise, it interests me. You have examined the ruby before, oui? Tell me, is it possible to forge such a gem?" Clara's eyes widened, but she answered steadily. "A forgery is possible, yes, but difficult. The Royal Heirloom Ruby has unique inclusions, flaws visible only under a loupe. A skilled jeweler could replicate it, but it would take time and access to the original." "And you have had such access?" Poirot asked, his tone light but probing. Clara flushed. "Only in my professional capacity at Lord Harrington's request. I catalogued his collection last year, but I assure you I've no part in this theft." "Naturellement," Poirot said, his eyes never leaving her face. "Yet you did not see Victor return from the garden. A curious lapse, no?" Clara's hands clenched. "I was unwell, as I said. I heard footsteps, but I didn't look out. I trust Victor." "Trust," Poirot mused. "It is a fragile thing. Merci, mademoiselle. We shall speak again." As Clara retreated, I turned to Poirot. "She's protecting Victor, isn't she? Or maybe she's hiding her own involvement. That business about forgeries, she knows too much." Poirot's eyes twinkled. "Knowledge, Hastings, is not guilt. But Mademoiselle Beaumont, she is a woman of secrets, like the others. The web, it grows more tangled. Come, let us review our clues. The missing cellar key, it suggests access to the house. The cigarette, it points to Victor. The footprint, it misleads. And now, the alibis. They crack like thin ice. The afternoon wore on, the manor steeped in an oppressive silence broken only by the ticking of clocks and the occasional creak of floorboards. Each guest, it seemed, carried a burden of suspicion, and the ruby's absence cast a long shadow over us all. Poirot, undaunted, moved with the precision of a chess master, each question a move toward checkmate. Yet the board, I feared, was far from clear, and the truth remained a phantom, elusive and mocking. Chapter 6. Hidden Affairs. The afternoon at Ashford Manor deepened into a somber stillness, the clouds outside gathering as if in sympathy with the mounting tension within. The theft of the Royal Heirloom Ruby had unraveled the veneer of civility among the household, and I, Captain Arthur Hastings, felt the weight of suspicion pressing upon us all. Hercule Poirot, however, remained a beacon of calm, his sharp mind slicing through the fog of deceit as we continued our investigation. The clues, the footprint, the cigarette, the button, the scrap of silk, lay scattered like pieces of a jigsaw puzzle, and I sensed that Poirot was beginning to see the shape they formed, even if I could not. We had retired to the library, a grand room lined with leather-bound tomes and heavy oak furniture, its air thick with the scent of old paper and polished wood. Poirot stood by a window overlooking the garden, his hands clasped behind his back, his mustache gleaming in the muted light. "Mon ami," he said, turning to me, "the heart of this mystery lies not only in the ruby's absence, but in the secrets of those who surround it. Love, greed, betrayal, they are the currents that swirl beneath the surface. We must dive deeper." I nodded, flipping through my notebook. Victor's debts, Clara's expertise, Thorne's knowledge, Lady Evelyn's nerves, Jenkins' loyalty. Everyone's hiding something, Poirot. But what's the connection? Poirot's eyes twinkled with that familiar spark of insight. "The connection, Hastings, is human nature. Let us begin with Mademoiselle Beaumont, her hesitation about Victor's alibi. It intrigues me. We shall speak with her alone. We found Clara in the conservatory, a glass-walled sanctuary filled with exotic plants and the soft trickle of a fountain. She sat on a wicker chair, her auburn hair catching the light as she turned a small book of poetry in her hands. Her expression was guarded, but softened slightly as we approached. "Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings," she said, rising. "Have you made progress?" Poirot inclined his head, his manner courteous but probing. "Progress, mademoiselle, comes from truth. You are affianced to Monsieur Victor, oui? Yet your account of last night, it lacks certainty. You heard footsteps, but saw nothing. Why this hesitation?" Clara's hands tightened on the book, her knuckles whitening. "I've told you I was unwell. I retired to my room after dinner. I heard someone in the hall, but I didn't look out. I assumed it was Victor returning from the garden." "Assumed," Poirot repeated, his voice soft but insistent. "Yet you are a woman of precision, a jeweler who sees flaws invisible to others. Tell me, mademoiselle, is there trouble between you and Victor? A matter of the heart, perhaps?" Clara's cheeks flushed, and she looked away, her gaze settling on a blooming orchid. "Victor and we've had disagreements. He's charming, but reckless. His gambling debts, they weigh on us. Last night we argued before dinner. He was angry, said he needed air. That's why he went to the garden." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "An argument? About what, précisément?" She hesitated, then sighed, as if the weight of her secret was too heavy to bear. "He's been distant lately. I found a letter in his coat pocket, a woman's handwriting suggesting an intimacy. I confronted him, and he dismissed it as a misunderstanding. But I'm not certain I believe him. I jotted this down, my pulse quickening." "A letter? From whom?" Clara shook her head. "It was unsigned. I burned it in a fit of anger. I know it was foolish, but I was hurt." Poirot's expression remained impassive, but I could see his mind at work. "This letter, it spoke of love, oui? And you believe Victor may be unfaithful?" "I don't know," Clara admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I want to trust him, but his debts, his secrecy, it's changed him." "Merci, mademoiselle," Poirot said gently. "Your candor, it is a light in the darkness. We shall speak again." As Clara returned to her poetry, Poirot led me back to the library. "A lover's quarrel, Hastings, and a mysterious letter. This adds a new thread to our tapestry. We must find Victor's secrets and his correspondence." We made our way to Victor's room, a spacious chamber overlooking the front drive, its walls adorned with hunting prints and a rack of sporting rifles. Poirot, with his usual disregard for propriety, began a methodical search, his gloved hands moving deftly through drawers and wardrobes. In a locked desk drawer, which he opened with a hairpin in a matter of seconds, we found a bundle of letters tied with a ribbon. Most were bills, unpaid, with stern demands for settlement, but one stood out, written in a delicate feminine hand. Poirot unfolded it, his eyes scanning the lines. "Regardez, Hastings, my dearest V, our moments together are my solace. Meet me as before when the house sleeps. Yours, always." No signature, but the scent of jasmine lingers on the paper. A clandestine affair, perhaps? I stared, my mind racing. Victor's been unfaithful to Clara? But who's the woman? And does this tie to the ruby? Poirot tucked the letter into his pocket. It ties to motive, mon ami. Love, it can drive one to desperate acts, perhaps even theft, to fund a secret life. But we must not assume. Let us seek another perspective. We found Dr. Elias Thorne in the billiard room, idly rolling a cue ball across the green felt. His sharp features tightened as we entered, but he offered a thin smile. Poirot? Hastings? Still chasing shadows? I'd wager the ruby's halfway to London by now. Poirot's smile was equally guarded. Perhaps, Doctor. But shadows, they are cast by light. Tell me, you have treated Lord Harrington for some time, oui? His health, it is delicate? Thorne's eyes narrowed behind his spectacles. He has a heart condition, yes. I prescribe digitalis to regulate it. Nothing unusual for a man of his age and stress. And this digitalis, Poirot said, his tone casual, it could perhaps induce sleep if misused? Enough to allow someone to borrow a key unnoticed. Thorne's hand paused on the cue ball, his expression hardening. A dangerous insinuation, Poirot. My prescriptions are precise, and Lord Harrington is vigilant about his medication. If you're suggesting I drugged him— No, Poirot interjected, raising a hand. I suggest nothing. I merely explore possibilities. You are a man of science, Doctor. You understand the need for thoroughness. Thorne relaxed slightly, but his gaze remained wary. Of course. But you'd do better to look at Victor's debts or Clara's expertise. They've more reason to steal than I. As we left the billiard room, I turned to Poirot. He's defensive, Poirot. That bit about the digitalis, you think he could have drugged Harrington to get the key? Poirot's lips pursed. Possible, Hastings, but unlikely. The doctor, he is clever, but his motive is unclear. The letters, however, they point to Victor. We must confront him. We found Victor in the garden, pacing near the fountain, a cigarette dangling from his lips. He turned as we approached, his expression a mix of defiance and exhaustion. What now, Poirot? Found another footprint to pin on me? Poirot held up the letter, his voice calm but unrelenting. Monsieur Victor, this was found in your desk. A woman's words, intimate and secret. Who is she? Victor's face paled, but he recovered quickly, snatching the letter. That's private. You've no right. I have every right, Poirot said sharply, when a ruby vanishes and secrets abound. This letter suggests an affair. Does Mademoiselle Beaumont know? Victor's jaw clenched, his eyes flashing. It's not what you think. The letter's from an old friend, nothing more. Clara's got it all wrong if she's been talking. An old friend, Poirot repeated, his tone skeptical. Yet you keep her words hidden. And your debts, monsieur, they are no secret. Did you take the ruby to pay them, perhaps to fund this friendship? Victor flung the cigarette to the ground, grinding it under his heel. I didn't touch the ruby. I was in the garden, like I said. You're barking up the wrong tree, Poirot. As he stormed off, I turned to Poirot. He's lying, isn't he? That letter, it's damning. And if he's desperate for money, the ruby's a perfect solution. Poirot nodded slowly. Perhaps, Hastings. But the letter, it is another thread in the web. Love, betrayal, debt. They entwine, but the pattern is not yet clear. We must watch closely, for the next move may reveal the hand behind the theft. As we returned to the manor, the air seemed heavier, the shadows longer. The secrets of Ashford Manor were beginning to surface, each revelation a step closer to the truth, or a deeper entanglement in the web of deception. Chapter 7. The Forgery Suspicion. The late afternoon light bathed Ashford Manor in a muted glow, the clouds parting briefly to reveal a sky streaked with hues of gold and gray. The oppressive atmosphere within the manor had only thickened since the morning, each guest retreating into their own thoughts as the mystery of the Royal Heirloom Ruby's disappearance tightened its grip. I, Captain Arthur Hastings, felt the strain of suspicion weighing on my shoulders, yet Hercule Poirot moved through the house with the quiet assurance of a man who saw order where others saw chaos. His gray cells, I knew, were piecing together the fragments of evidence, the footprint, the cigarette, the button, the silk scrap, the hidden letter, into a pattern that eluded me. We had returned to the study, the scene of the crime, where the vault's empty interior seemed to mock our efforts. Poirot stood before it, his magnifying glass poised, his eyes tracing the steel surface with meticulous care. "Mon ami," he said, turning to me, "the vault, it is a silent witness, but it speaks to those who listen. Regardez, this faint scratch here, near the lock. It is not deep, but it is deliberate. What does it suggest?" I leaned closer, squinting at the barely visible mark. A slip of a tool, perhaps? Someone trying to force the lock? Poirot shook his head, his mustache twitching. "No, Hastings. The lock is intact, the key unneeded if the combination is known. This scratch, it is too precise, too subtle. It suggests not a break-in, but a deception, a hint of tampering to mislead. Perhaps a substitution, not a theft." I frowned, my mind grappling with the idea. A substitution? You mean the ruby in the vault wasn't the real one? "Précisément," Poirot said, his voice low. "What if the ruby was replaced before the unveiling? A forgery, placed to be stolen while the true gem remains hidden. We must test this theory." He turned to the door as Clara Beaumont entered, her auburn hair catching the light from the chandelier. She carried a small case, likely her jeweler's tools, and her expression was one of professional curiosity, tempered by unease. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, "I heard you were examining the vault again. May I assist? My expertise might be useful." Poirot's eyes gleamed with interest. "Mademoiselle Beaumont, your timing is impeccable. You are a connoisseur of gems, oui? Tell me, could a forgery of the Royal Heirloom Ruby be crafted so perfectly as to fool even Lord Harrington?" Clara set her case on the desk, opening it to reveal a jeweler's loupe and other instruments. "It's possible," she said, her voice steady, but her hands trembling slightly as she adjusted her loupe. The ruby's unique inclusions, tiny flaws in its structure, are its signature. A skilled forger could replicate its color and cut, but those inclusions would be nearly impossible to mimic without months of work and access to the original. "And you have had such access," Poirot said, his tone neutral but probing. "You catalogued Lord Harrington's collection, did you not?" Clara's cheeks flushed, but she met his gaze. "Yes, last year. I studied the ruby closely, as I did all his gems. But I assure you, Monsieur Poirot, I've no part in any forgery." "Naturellement," Poirot said, though his eyes never left her face. "Yet let us test the theory. Lord Harrington keeps a replica of the ruby, oui? For display, perhaps? Might we examine it?" Clara nodded, crossing to a glass cabinet in the corner of the study. She retrieved a velvet-lined box and opened it to reveal a ruby that, to my untrained eye, was indistinguishable from the descriptions of the royal heirloom. She handed it to Poirot, who held it to the light, then passed it to Clara. "Your verdict, mademoiselle?" She examined it through her loupe, her brow furrowing. "It's flawless," she said, her voice tinged with surprise. "Too flawless. The real ruby has a faint inclusion near its center, like a starburst. This one lacks it. It's a replica, as Lord Harrington intended, but an exceptional one." Poirot's lips curved into a faint smile. "Exceptional, oui. And yet, if a forgery was placed in the vault, who could have crafted it? Who had the skill, the opportunity?" Before Clara could respond, Victor stormed into the study, his face flushed with anger. "What's this about forgeries? Are you accusing Clara now, Poirot? She's the only honest one here." Poirot raised a hand, his voice calm but firm. "Calm yourself, Monsieur Victor. I accuse no one, yet. But the scratch on the vault, the perfection of this replica, they suggest a plan more complex than simple theft. Your debts, they give you motive, non? And your absence last night, it remains unverified." Victor's eyes flashed. "You're barking up the wrong tree. I was in the garden, and I didn't touch the ruby. Why don't you look at Thorne? He's the one with all the talk about gems and forgeries. As if summoned, Doctor." Elias Thorne appeared at the door, his lean frame tense. "I heard my name," he said, his voice clipped. "If you're referring to my article on gem forgeries, Poirot, it was purely academic. I've no practical experience in such matters." Poirot's gaze was unrelenting. "Yet your knowledge, Doctor, it is precise. You wrote of Ruby's flaws, their inclusions. Could you not identify a forgery, or create one?" Thorne's spectacles glinted as he adjusted them. "A baseless accusation. My interest is scientific, not criminal. Victor's debts are a far more likely motive. He's drowning in them, isn't he?" Victor took a step toward Thorne, his fists clenched. "You've got nerve, Thorne. Accusing me when you're always sniffing around Father's collection." Clara stepped between them, her voice sharp. "Enough, both of you." "This isn't helping. Monsieur Poirot, the replica proves nothing. The real ruby was in the vault. Lord Harrington saw it yesterday morning." Poirot nodded, his expression enigmatic. "Oui, mademoiselle, but what he saw, was it truly the ruby? Or a deception so clever it fooled even him?" As Victor and Thorne exchanged glares, Lady Evelyn entered, her face pale but composed. "Monsieur Poirot, this talk of forgeries, it's absurd. My husband would know his own ruby. He's studied it for years." "Perhaps, madame," Poirot said gently. "Yet the human eye, it can be deceived by desire." "We shall see." He turned back to the vault, his fingers tracing the scratch once more. "This mark, it is a whisper of intent. Someone wished us to believe the vault was tampered with, yet the lock remained secure. A forgery, a theft, or both? The truth, it lies close. I scribbled furiously in my notebook, trying to keep up. Poirot, if it's a forgery, who had the chance to switch it? Clara's the expert, but she'd need time. Thorne knows about gems, but he's no jeweler. And Victor, well, he's got motive, but not the skill." Poirot's eyes twinkled. "You see the pieces, Hastings, but not the pattern. The forgery, if it exists, required planning, access, and cunning. But there is another possibility. The ruby was never in the vault at all. A deception before the unveiling, perhaps?" I stared, my mind reeling. "But Harrington saw it at dawn." "He's certain." "Certainty," Poirot said softly, "is the enemy of truth when it blinds. We must question everything, even the certainties of Lord Harrington. As we left the study, the household dispersed, their voices hushed, but laced with accusation. Clara lingered, her gaze troubled, while Victor stormed off, muttering about injustice. Thorne retreated to the library, his expression unreadable, and Lady Evelyn returned to her rooms, her composure fraying at the edges. Outside, the sky darkened, promising rain. I turned to Poirot, my voice low. "This forgery business, it's a game-changer, isn't it? If the ruby was a fake, the theft could be a cover for something else entirely." Poirot nodded, his gaze distant. "Oui, Hastings. The web of secrets grows denser. The scratch, the replica, the motives, they point to a truth hidden in plain sight. But we must tread carefully, for the next revelation may be the most dangerous yet." The manor seemed to close in around us, its walls echoing with unspoken truths. The ruby's absence was no longer just a theft, it was a puzzle of deception, and I knew that only Poirot's relentless logic could unravel it. Chapter 8. Family Betrayals. The skies over Ashford Manor had darkened to a brooding slate, the threat of rain now a palpable presence as the afternoon waned. The theft of the Royal Heirloom Ruby had woven a tapestry of suspicion that seemed to tighten around the household with every passing hour. I, Captain Arthur Hastings, felt the strain of the mystery pressing upon me. Each clue, a footprint, a cigarette, a button, a scrap of silk, a letter, a scratch on the vault, adding to the labyrinthine puzzle. Hercule Poirot, however, moved through this web with the precision of a master weaver, his gray cells untangling threads that remained hopelessly knotted to my own mind. We had retreated to the drawing-room, where the fire crackled fitfully, casting flickering shadows across the faces of the assembled company. The air was thick with unspoken accusations, and the elegance of the previous evening's gathering now seemed a distant memory. Poirot stood by the mantel, his small frame radiating an authority that commanded attention. "Mes amis," he said, his voice cutting through the tension, "the ruby's absence reveals more than its presence ever could. Secrets, they surface like bubbles in a stream. Let us examine them closely." Lady Evelyn, seated on a velvet settee, broke the silence first, her voice trembling with a mix of anguish and defiance. "Monsieur Poirot, this ordeal is tearing us apart. Reginald's obsession with that wretched ruby, it has ruined us. Our finances, our peace, all sacrificed for his collection." Her hands twisted in her lap, the pearls at her throat catching the firelight. Poirot's eyes softened, but his tone remained firm. "Madame, you speak of ruin. Financial, perhaps. The ruby, it is valuable, enough to restore a family's fortunes, no?" Lady Evelyn's face paled, and she glanced at her husband, who stood by the window, his back rigid. "Reginald's acquisitions have been costly," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "The ruby, the other gems, they've drained our accounts. But to suggest one of us stole it, it's unthinkable." Lord Harrington turned, his eyes blazing. "Enough, Evelyn. My collection is my legacy, not a curse. The ruby was stolen, not by us, but by some cunning thief." Poirot raised a hand, his gaze steady. "Yet, Lord Harrington, the vault was locked, the key on your person. The thief, they are close, perhaps closer than you wish to believe. Tell me, madame, you overheard something last night, did you not? A conversation, perhaps?" Lady Evelyn hesitated, her fingers tightening on her shawl. I heard Victor arguing with someone in the hall before dinner. He was angry, speaking of selling heirlooms to settle his debts. I thought it was with Clara, but I couldn't be sure." "Victor? who had been slouched in an armchair, shot to his feet, his face flushed. "Mother, you're twisting things. I was upset, yes, but I never said I'd sell Father's precious ruby. I was talking about some old paintings in the attic, nothing more." Poirot's mustache twitched, his eyes narrowing. "Paintings, Monsieur Victor? Yet your debts, they are substantial, no? And your letter from this mysterious woman, it suggests other pressures, perhaps a need for funds, for a secret life." Victor's jaw clenched, his hands balling into fists. "You've no right to pry into my private affairs, Poirot. That letter's nothing. A friend, as I said. And I was in the garden when the ruby went missing." Clara, seated nearby, looked up, her hazel eyes clouded with pain. "Victor, you never told me about selling anything. Why keep it from me?" Victor's expression softened, but only briefly. "Because it's none of your business, Clara. I'm handling it." Poirot turned to Mr. Jenkins, who stood silently by the door, his face as impassive as ever. "Monsieur Jenkins, you're the eyes and ears of this house. Did you hear this argument of which Lady Evelyn speaks?" Jenkins inclined his head, his voice steady. "I heard raised voices, sir, but I was in the pantry, preparing for the evening. I couldn't make out the words, nor did I see who was speaking." Poirot's gaze sharpened. "Yet you know this house intimately, oui? Tell me, is there a way into the study that we have not considered? A passage, perhaps, known only to the family?" Jenkins stiffened, a flicker of unease crossing his face. "There is a passage, sir, from the cellar to the study. It's an old servant's tunnel used in the manor's early days, but it's locked, and only the family knows of it. I swore secrecy to his lordship." A murmur rippled through the room. Lord Harrington's face reddened. "Jenkins, you were to keep that confidential." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Secrets, Lord Harrington, they breed suspicion. This passage, might it have been used last night?" Jenkins shook his head. "The door's rusted shut, sir. I checked it myself last week. No one could have used it without leaving signs." Poirot nodded, his expression thoughtful. "Yet signs, they can be erased. Let us inspect this passage." We followed Jenkins to the cellar, a dank, stone-walled space lined with racks of wine bottles and crates of preserves. At the far end, behind a dusty tapestry, was a low wooden door, its hinges indeed rusted but intact. Poirot examined it closely, his magnifying glass glinting in the dim light of a lantern. "No fresh marks," he murmured. "Yet the lock, it is old, easily picked. And regardez, Hastings, a glove caught in the crevice." He retrieved a small cream-colored glove, its lace trim delicate but slightly torn. I gasped. "That's a lady's glove, Poirot." Could it be Clara's? Clara, who had followed us, stepped forward, her face pale. "It looks like mine, but I lost a glove weeks ago. I swear I haven't been down here." Poirot held the glove to the light, his eyes narrowing. "Lost, mademoiselle? Or placed? This glove, it is another thread in the web. Someone wishes us to look at you, perhaps." Victor snorted, his voice laced with scorn. "Another trick, Poirot? You're seeing conspiracies everywhere. That glove could belong to any woman in the house." Lady Evelyn, standing at the cellar's edge, clutched her shawl. "Not mine, Monsieur Poirot. I've no such gloves. This is madness. My family, torn apart by suspicion." Dr. Thorne, who had joined us, adjusted his spectacles, his voice calm but pointed. "Indeed, Poirot, you're stirring up trouble with these theatrics. the glove, the passage, they prove nothing. Focus on Victor's debts or Clara's access to the ruby. Poirot's smile was enigmatic. Trouble, doctor? No, I seek clarity. The passage, the glove, the argument, they are pieces of the puzzle. Each of you hide something. The ruby, it is not merely stolen. It is a mirror reflecting your betrayals. As we returned to the drawing room, the atmosphere was electric with tension. Victor and Clara exchanged strained glances. Lady Evelyn's composure was fraying, and Thorne's scholarly detachment seemed a thin veneer. Jenkins, ever the silent sentinel, retreated to his duties, but I caught a flicker of worry in his eyes. I leaned toward Poirot, my voice low. This passage changes things, doesn't it? Someone could have slipped into the study unnoticed. And the glove, Clara's, or a plant to frame her? Poirot's eyes twinkled. The passage, Hastings, it is a possibility, not a certainty. The glove, it is a red herring meant to distract. But from what? The betrayals in this family run deep. Victor's secrets, Clara's doubts, Lady Evelyn's fears, even Lord Harrington's obsession. We are close, mon ami, to a truth that will shake this house. The rain began to fall outside, a soft patter against the windows, as if the manor itself wept for the secrets it held. The ruby's absence was no longer just a theft. It was a catalyst, exposing the fractures in a family bound by duty and torn by betrayal. Poirot's gaze was unwavering, and I knew that the next revelation would bring us closer to the heart of the mystery, or deeper into its shadows. Chapter 9. The Gathering of Suspects. The evening had descended upon Ashford Manor with a heavy pall, the rain now a steady drumbeat against the windows, cloaking the estate in a somber shroud. The air inside was thick with anticipation, as if the very walls of the manor sensed the climax of the drama unfolding within. The theft of the Royal Heirloom. Ruby had unraveled the delicate threads of trust among the household, and I, Captain Arthur Hastings, felt the weight of the mystery pressing upon me like a physical force. Hercule Poirot, however, stood as a beacon of calm certainty, his gray cells poised to weave the disparate clues — footprint, cigarette, button, silk, letter, vault scratch, glove, and secret passage — into a coherent tapestry of truth. Poirot had summoned the household to the study, the very room where the ruby had vanished, and the atmosphere was electric with tension as we gathered. The chandelier cast a soft glow over the oak-paneled walls, its light reflecting off the open vault, which stood as a mute accusation. Lord Reginald Harrington stood by the fireplace, his face a mask of indignation and fatigue, his silver hair disheveled. Lady Evelyn sat rigidly on a leather chair, her hands clasped tightly, her eyes darting nervously. Victor lounged against a bookshelf, his expression a mix of defiance and unease, while Clara Beaumont stood near the window, her auburn hair catching the light, her face pale but composed. Dr. Elias Thorne leaned against the desk, his spectacles glinting as he surveyed the room with a scholarly detachment that seemed increasingly strained. Mr. Jenkins, the butler, stood by the door, his stoic demeanor unshaken, but his eyes betraying a flicker of apprehension. Poirot paced slowly before the vault, his small frame commanding the room's attention. "Mes amis," he began, his voice clear and resonant, "the Royal Heirloom Ruby has vanished, yet the vault remains unbreached, the key secure with Lord Harrington. This is no ordinary theft. It is a puzzle of motive, opportunity, and deception. Tonight, We shall unravel it. Each clue, each secret has led us here. Let us review." He paused, his eyes sweeping the room, and I clutched my notebook, ready to capture every word. "The footprint beneath the study window," he continued, "fresh, deliberate, yet the window locked. A misdirection, oui? The cigarette, Turkish, like Monsieur Victor's, but dry when it should be damp, a plant to cast suspicion. The button with the Harrington crest, the scrap of silk, lost or placed. The letter in Victor's desk, hinting at an affair, stirring jealousy in Mademoiselle Beaumont. The scratch on the vault, suggesting tampering, yet no lock was forced. The glove in the secret passage, resembling Mademoiselle Clara's, yet conveniently lost. And the passage itself, known only to the family, locked but not impregnable. These are the threads of our web. Lord Harrington's voice cut through the silence, sharp with frustration. "Enough theatrics, Poirot. You've poked and prodded, turned my family against each other. Where's the ruby? Who took it?" Poirot raised a hand, his expression serene. "Patience, Lord Harrington. The ruby, it is not far. But first we must untangle the motives. Monsieur Victor, your debts, they are a shadow over you. The ruby, it could erase them, non? Yet your alibi falters. Clara did not see you return from the garden." Victor's jaw tightened, his eyes flashing. "I told you, I was outside." "I didn't touch the ruby. You're wasting time on me when others had more to gain." Poirot turned to Clara, his gaze gentle but probing. "Mademoiselle Beaumont, your expertise with gems, it is unparalleled. You catalogued the ruby, knew its flaws. A forgery, perhaps, crafted by your skilled hands." Clara's face flushed, but her voice was steady. "I've said it before, Monsieur Poirot. I had no part in this. The replica in the cabinet is just that, a display piece. I'd stake my reputation on it." "Reputation?" Poirot mused. "It is a fragile thing. And you, Dr. Thorne? Your knowledge of gem forgeries, your access to Lord Harrington's medication, digitalis, which could induce sleep, allowing a key to be taken. Your interest in the ruby, it is more than academic, non?" Thorne adjusted his spectacles, his voice cold. "You overreach, Poirot. My paper was theoretical, and I've never touched Harrington's medication beyond prescribing it. Look to Victor's recklessness or Clara's access, not me." Lady Evelyn's voice trembled as she spoke. "Monsieur Poirot, must you torment us? My family is no den of thieves. The ruby was stolen by an outsider, surely." Poirot's eyes softened, but his tone remained firm. "Madame, the locked windows, the secure vault, they deny an outsider. And you, your distress, it hides more than grief. You overheard Victor speak of selling heirlooms. Was it only paintings, or something more?" Lady Evelyn's hands twisted in her lap. I don't know. I was mistaken, perhaps. Victor would never betray us." Poirot turned to Jenkins, standing like a sentinel by the door. "And you, Monsieur Jenkins, keeper of the house's secrets, the passage from the cellar, known to the family, your loyalty blinded you to its use, perhaps? Or did you see more than you admit?" Jenkins' face remained impassive, but his voice was tight. "I've served faithfully, sir. The passage was locked, as I said. I saw nothing untoward." Poirot nodded, his pacing resuming. "A web of secrets, mes amis. Victor's debts, Clara's knowledge, Thorne's expertise, Lady Evelyn's fears, Jenkins' loyalty, each a thread. Yet one thread binds them all." He stopped before the vault, his finger tracing the faint scratch. "This mark, it is not a sign of theft, but of deception." The ruby! It was not stolen. It was hidden. A collective gasp filled the room. Lord Harrington stepped forward, his face red with indignation. Hidden? Nonsense, Poirot! I saw it in the vault at dawn. Poirot's eyes gleamed with certainty. Did you, Lord Harrington? Or did you see what you wished to see? The ruby, it is close, but the thief, they are closer still. Let us consider the motives. Greed, yes, but also desperation, betrayal, even love. Each of you have played a part in this drama, knowingly or not. Victor snorted, his voice laced with scorn. You're spinning tales, Poirot. If it's hidden, where is it? Show us. Clara's voice was soft but firm. Monsieur Poirot, if the ruby's hidden, why stage a theft? What purpose does it serve? Poirot's smile was enigmatic. The purpose, mademoiselle, is to obscure the truth. The footprint, the cigarette, the glove, they are distractions, meant to point us away from the heart of the matter. But I, Poirot, see through the fog. Thorne's voice was sharp. Enough riddles, Poirot. If you know something, say it plainly. Poirot raised a hand, his voice rising with theatrical flourish. Patience, doctor. The truth, it emerges like a star from the clouds. The ruby's disappearance, it is not the end, but the beginning. One among you knows where it lies, and soon all shall be revealed. The room fell silent, the only sound the patter of rain and the crackle of the fire. Each face, Harrington's fury, Evelyn's fear, Victor's defiance, Clara's uncertainty, Thorne's wariness, Jenkins' stoicism, seemed to hold a piece of the puzzle. I scribbled furiously in my notebook, my heart pounding. Poirot was close, I could feel it, but the final piece remained just out of reach. As the group dispersed, their murmurs of discontent trailing behind them, Poirot drew me aside. Hastings, the stage is set. The clues, they align, but one truth remains hidden. Tomorrow we shall pull the final thread, and the web will unravel. I nodded, my mind racing. You're sure it's not stolen, Poirot? But who hid it, and why? And that scratch, it's still nagging at me. Poirot's eyes twinkled. The scratch, Hastings, it is the key. Not to the vault, but to the mind of the deceiver. Sleep now, mon ami. The dawn will bring clarity. As we retired to our rooms, the rain intensified, a relentless chorus against the manor's walls. The ruby's absence was a spectre, haunting every corner, and I knew that Poirot's next move would either expose the truth or plunge us deeper into the shadows of Ashford Manor's secrets. Chapter 10. The Shocking Twist. The rain had ceased by the time dawn broke over Ashford Manor, leaving the estate shrouded in a mist that clung to the grounds like a lingering secret. The air inside the manor was heavy with expectation, the tension of the previous evening's gathering in the study still palpable. I, Captain Arthur Hastings, had barely slept, my mind consumed by the web of clues: footprint, cigarette, button, silk scrap, letter, vault scratch, glove, secret passage, and Hercule Poirot's cryptic assurance that the Royal Heirloom Ruby had not been stolen, but hidden. As we assembled once more in the study, the room felt like a stage set for the final act of a drama, and Poirot, with his unerring flair for the theatrical, was ready to unveil the truth. The chandelier cast a soft, unforgiving light over the gathered company. Lord Reginald Harrington stood by the vault, his face a mask of weary defiance, his hands clenched at his sides. Lady Evelyn sat rigidly, her eyes red-rimmed but resolute, her pearls gleaming faintly. Victor leaned against the wall, his expression a volatile mix of anger and apprehension, while Clara Beaumont stood near the desk, her auburn hair neatly pinned, her face pale but composed. Dr. Elias Thorne adjusted his spectacles, his scholarly air tinged with unease, and Mr. Jenkins, the butler, stood by the door, his stoic demeanor unshaken, but his gaze alert. I clutched my notebook, my heart pounding, sensing that Poirot's revelation would shake the foundations of this troubled household. Poirot paced slowly before the vault, his small frame commanding the room with an authority that belied his stature. "Mes amis," he began, his voice resonant with purpose, "the Royal Heirloom Ruby has vanished, yet the vault remains unbreached, the key secure with Lord Harrington. The clues, footprint, cigarette, glove, letter, passage, and scratch, have woven a web of deception. But I, Hercule Poirot, see through the shadows. The ruby is not stolen, it is hidden, and the truth, it lies among us." A murmur of disbelief rippled through the room. Lord Harrington's voice was sharp with indignation. "Hidden? Preposterous, Poirot! I saw the ruby in the vault at dawn yesterday. You've spun theories all day, but where's the proof?" Poirot raised a hand, his eyes gleaming with certainty. "Proof, Lord Harrington, is in the details. Let us unravel the web. The footprint beneath the window, fresh, but the window locked. The cigarette, Turkish, like Monsieur Victor's, but dry when it should be damp. The glove in the passage, resembling Mademoiselle Clara's, yet conveniently lost. The letter in Victor's desk, hinting at an affair. The scratch on the vault, suggesting tampering, yet no lock forced. The passage, known only to the family. Each clue a distraction meant to obscure the truth." He paused, turning to face the group, his gaze piercing. "Victor, your debts scream motive, yet the cigarette was placed to frame you. Mademoiselle Clara, your expertise could craft a forgery, yet the glove points too neatly to you. Dr. Thorne, your knowledge of gems and access to digitalis tempt suspicion, but your pills remain unused. Madame Evelyn, your distress hides resentment, yet you did not act alone. Monsieur Jenkins, your loyalty blinds you to the family secrets, but one among you wove this web, and I shall name them." The room fell silent, the only sound the faint tick of a clock. Poirot stopped before Lord Harrington, his voice rising with dramatic intensity. "The thief is you, Lord Harrington!" A collective gasp filled the air. Harrington's face flushed crimson, his eyes wide with shock. "Me? You're mad, Poirot! I'm the victim here!" Poirot's expression was unyielding. "No, Lord Harrington, you are the architect of this deception. The ruby was never stolen. It was hidden by you in a false compartment within the vault, to claim insurance and pay your debts. The footprint, you made it yourself, using an old boot to suggest an outsider. The cigarette you took from Victor's case to cast suspicion on your son. The scratch on the vault, a deliberate mark to imply tampering. You staged the theft, believing it would save your family from ruin." Lady Evelyn clutched her chair, her voice trembling. "Reginald, tell him he's wrong." "You wouldn't do this." Harrington's shoulders slumped, his defiance crumbling. I had no choice, Evelyn. The debts from my collection, they were crushing us. The insurance money would have saved Ashford Manor." Victor stepped forward, his face pale. "Father, you frame me? Your own son?" Poirot raised a hand, his voice cutting through the chaos. "But there is more, mes amis, a twist even Lord Harrington did not foresee. The ruby, it was not the original. Years ago, you, Lord Harrington, sold the true Royal Heirloom Ruby in secret, replacing it with a flawless forgery crafted by an expert. The theft was to cover this truth, to claim insurance without revealing your deception. But you were betrayed by Mademoiselle Clara. Clara gasped, her hands flying to her face. No, that's not true. Poirot's eyes locked onto hers, relentless. Oui, mademoiselle, you were Lord Harrington's accomplice, his secret lover, and the jeweler who crafted the forgery years ago. You knew the original was sold, and when Harrington planned this staged theft, you saw your chance. You took the forged ruby from the vault before the unveiling, hiding it in your room, intending to claim the insurance money for yourself. But I, Poirot, examined the replica in the cabinet. It is the true ruby, hidden by you to double-cross your lover. Clara's composure shattered, her voice rising in panic. You can't prove that. I didn't. Poirot produced a small velvet pouch from his pocket, opening it to reveal the gleaming ruby. This, mademoiselle, I found in your jewelry case, concealed behind a false panel, the true Royal Heirloom Ruby with its starburst inclusion. You underestimated the little gray cells Clara bolted for the door, but Jenkins, with surprising agility, blocked her path. She collapsed into a chair, sobbing. I only wanted what was owed me. Reginald promised me a share, but he lied. Harrington's face was ashen, his voice a whisper. Clara, you betrayed me? Poirot's voice softened, but his gaze remained firm. Mon Dieu, greed curses more than any gem. Lord Harrington, your deception began this chain. Mademoiselle Clara, your betrayal completed it. The ruby is recovered, and justice shall follow. As Jenkins escorted Clara to await the authorities, and Harrington sank into a chair, broken by his own machinations, the room seemed to exhale. Lady Evelyn wept quietly. Victor stared in stunned silence, and Thorne shook his head, as if marveling at the folly unveiled. I scribbled the final notes in my notebook, my heart racing at the audacity of Poirot's revelation. As we stepped into the hall, the mist outside lifting to reveal a pale sunrise, I turned to Poirot. You knew all along, didn't you? The scratch, the ruby in Clara's room, how did you see it? Poirot's eyes twinkled. The scratch, Hastings, it was too perfect, a sign of intent, not accident. The clues, they pointed inward, not outward. And Mademoiselle Clara, her expertise, her hesitation, her love for Harrington, they betrayed her. The ruby, it was never cursed, only coveted. The manor seemed lighter, its secrets laid bare. The ruby, restored to its rightful place, gleamed under the chandelier, its beauty untainted by the greed that had nearly destroyed a family. Poirot, with his relentless logic, had triumphed once more, and I knew that Ashford Manor would never forget the night Hercule Poirot unraveled its darkest truths.